Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 501 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our fifth book just came out. It's called Perseverance and How to Be a Great Fraternity or Sorority Alumnus. So go and pick up that book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, with the rising costs of food at the grocery store and also the higher costs of dining out here in the United States, I've actually subscribed to a meal plan where they send meals to my home, and I found that they're able to get me better pricing than what I pay at the grocery store. So now I'm cooking new meals and I'm saving money. It's a win-win situation. But I did want to chat today with an expert on saving money when it comes to food for all of our college student listeners. And I think you're going to absolutely love this conversation. Kimberley Gillan, it has a background in economics, policy, and strategy planning, and uses her practical knowledge to find new answers to old questions, such as what is the lowest price you would have to pay for food without compromising on nutrition? Or what are the key ingredients in laundry detergent? In answering these questions, Kimberley uses fundamental economic principles to come up with revolutionary answers on what your minimum spend should be in order to live your best life. She lives all the way in far north Queensland, Australia, where it's actually tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Welcome to the show, Kimberley.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, it is an honor and a privilege to have you on the show. And I tell you what, the topic you're an expert in is exactly what our college students need to hear. So let's talk a little bit about it. Food insecurity is really something that is fairly common on college campuses today in the United States, with the rising costs of higher education, as well as increasing inflation as it relates to the grocery store foods. And food insecurity became very personal for you after an illness forced you to stop working. So, how can you make lasting changes to your diet that will benefit both your wallet and also your well being?
Okay. This, of course, is the fundamental question that I spent 18 months studying, and it became a book. I didn't start the journey going, oh, I'm going to write a book about this. But I wanted to know because I could see here in Australia and around the world that food costs were continuing to increase. And I did my master's dissertation on food security 10 plus years ago. And it was everything that we had been told coming into fruition. So I guess the first thing I want to say to the student fraternity is food price rises, especially on fresh produce, are going to continue. I put it under the banner of climate change, unsustainable agricultural practices, and population increases, which are going to continue for some time yet. So without diving deep into that, what does it mean if you're a student on campus? And it means that perhaps some of the things that you've been encouraged to do, such as loading your plate up with fresh fruit and vegetables, that is still the most ideal thing to do. But it can be harder to manage financially all the time. And also, when you're getting used to living that new life away from the family home where a lot of these things were taken care of for you, you can find yourself in situations where you didn't get to the shops, you've run out of money. My strongest advice for everyone, but particularly for university students, is to start leaning into your dehydrated produce. We are sold that fresh is best, yet when you look at food composition tables, dehydration processes lock in very high levels of nutrition. So my advice is start thinking about skim milk, dehydrated skim milk powder. This is the basis of most of those protein shakes that you buy in the supermarket. If you don't have lactose intolerance, learn to use skim milk powder as an ingredient. You can put together a protein shake in a little container that has vanilla flavor powder, milk powder, some fine oats and a few other things that are going to give you a good start to the day. Put that into a shaker container, add some water. That's your breakfast done. You're out the door. And it can be a really great start for the day. Or you can take it in its dry form in a milkshake container, a shaker container, and add water to it later. So that's something, if you can't afford the meals on campus, having that protein shake option, which is going to have some fiber and a few other things in it, is a great way to go. But I also encourage pulses, lentils, chickpeas. I cannot emphasize chickpeas enough. They cover so much of what you need. So if you can't afford a great deal of meat, but you like to eat meat, grab one lamb shank or whatever works for you and bulk out, make it a stew with that really rich, tasty piece of meat, but put in lots of lentils or chickpeas. They'll provide lots of protein. They'll take that meaty flavor and make it go further. So that those are some of the things that I suggest. I also say lean into your nutrient-dense foods. It's not going to cut it living on ramen noodles. I know many students do that. It's kind of the student food. We've got already in America 1 in 5 who have some form of malnutrition. And it's hidden malnutrition because your stomach's full. You may even be overweight. But if you're not getting the broad range of nutrition, it's going to show up eventually. And the ways it can show it up is tiredness, bruising easily. Do you feel like you're constantly catching whatever flu or cough or cold is going around? These are all some of the subtle ways that your ramen noodles come back to haunt you. I'm very anti ramen noodles. So instead of ramen noodles, there are some really easy shortcuts, and I suggest angel pasta with pesto. You can make that in the same amount of time that you make your noodles. I suggest potatoes. Potatoes are brilliant for young, hungry students. And girls, they're good for you. They really are. And those sorts of complex carbohydrates will fill you up, and they provide so much benefit. They'll fill almost all the gaps in your nutrition. So fill your plate with mixed frozen vegetables or potatoes. And yeah, things like carrots too, they're great. So I've talked for quite a bit. I should probably give you a chance, Mike, to say something.
That's great advice. Listen, I completely agree with everything. I certainly agree that the cost of food is going to continue to go up here in the United States. They were just talking recently about some of the ports and the workers at the ports that are going on strike. So now suddenly, things like paper towels and toilet paper are now suddenly, we can't get our hands on it. We can't find it in the store. And it's like, man, oh man, we're going backwards. We're like going back to COVID times now. So yeah, I think all of this stuff is going to continue to increase, and we have to find ways to deal with it. And I think your suggestions are right on. I love chickpeas. I think they're fantastic. I'm a big Middle Eastern guy, so having falafel and other types of food that really depends on the chickpea is great, high in protein, and so that really can help a lot of students. Really good stuff. I just came back from the grocery store today and I realized how much my bill was. It was outrageous. And I feel like there are these traps at the supermarket that are designed to help increase spending. So, how do we avoid these common supermarket marketing traps?
Okay, I'm going to ask your listeners to gamify their shopping experience. So, when you're heading through the turnstiles into the supermarket, see it as a game, because it is a game. Supermarkets are very carefully set up to be an obstacle course where all along the way, as you zigzag up and down the aisles, you are going to be beset with traps. These traps can be as subtle as the large red and yellow tickets that they put on things. It can stimulate hunger and a sense of urgency. And you think, I've got to buy that. And the whole theory is that you've got to spend money to save money, right? Well, no, you don't. If it's not going to replace something that you were going to have this week or next week, no, it's not saving you money. So I encourage this mindset that you are playing a game. It's you versus the supermarket, and that the strategy that of the goal of the game is for you to stick to your shopping list, your plan, and to stick to your budget. And if you get to the checkout and you haven't fallen for any of their traps, then visualize that scoreboard 1-0 in your favor. I think this is a really great psychological hack to learn for many things in life, and it definitely works really well for supermarket shopping. I must admit that there have been times when I've been tempted to run up and down in the supermarket and, scream like I just kicked a goal at the 50-yard line, but I've managed to contain myself.
Good for you. I like it. And you're absolutely right. I mean, colors, you look at McDonald's with the red and yellow, that's all by design to get you to purchase more and that sense of urgency. And you're also right about the setup of the grocery store. The milk is always in the back corner of the grocery store.
Mhm.
And so it's very intentional. They want you to basically fall into all these traps on the way to you getting milk in the furthest corner away from the entrance. So it is all by design. There's nothing that happens by accident in the grocery store.
No, there's a huge industry worldwide built just on that,
Oh,
just on supermarket layout.
amazing.
Mm.
Absolutely amazing. I want to talk to you a little bit about your meal planning and your preparation. What does that look like for you, let's say, on a weekly basis in order to achieve a goal of, let's say, $30 a week on a food budget?
Yeah. Okay. So for a university student, I would suggest that you'd be looking at about $35 a week. And I say this because you're probably not going to have the time for some of these tighter plans. Um, you want more convenience meals. That's my assumption. So, but typically, there's one half day a fortnight for a student in the plans in my book where they do some bulk cooking. And that can include putting together their own stock to cook their rice and pasta and so forth in from the scraps from the other meals. So there's real advantages in putting aside one afternoon a week, and also start bulk cooking more meals in that period before exams. We've got certain months of the year where, as a university student, it's going to get really crazy. You're going to have a lot of assessment tasks due, and you're going to have preparation for exams, and having a few more meals prepped in advance, because it can be really easy to forget to eat healthy food. If it's already, if you've got a curry or a stew or something in the freezer in a single serve size and it just needs reheating, you're more likely to eat it. And it's going to help you through what's a really stressful time. So my suggestion is that for $35, some of the plans I've got for university students, one of them involves a hot chicken. Now, I know that's not budget food, but if you learn to use every part of that chicken, including turning the chicken carcass into a really beautiful chicken soup, it will go you a long time. You can make that one chicken go a very long distance, and then it becomes both convenient and budget food. So I have 2 fortnightly plans in my book that talk about the easy, simple route for students. If you were really wanting to dig down into the lowest cost, that would be $30 a week. Not a lot of difference. And then you're looking at a lot of pulses, lentils, split peas, chickpeas. And also I encourage a trail mix for students using popcorn. Popcorn, making your own popping corn, it's a great filler. It's got fiber and it's quick and easy to do. You can make all the popcorn you need for the next 4 or 5 days and stick it in a jar, and then you can get creative with your flavorings. I do an Asian one using sesame oil. And so I typically say for students, protein shake in the morning, trail mix for lunch, and these are all pre-made. They're really quick and easy. And then things like protein balls using peanut butter. Peanut butter is great for students. And then have an evening meal that you prepare one day a fortnight, and you do 2 or 3 bulk cook meals. That's it. That's your fortnight sorted.
Wow, really, really good stuff. I love it. I mean, you're giving us some really great practical advice with the lentils, the chickpeas. You mentioned potatoes are really good, popcorn. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about? Because, I mean, you're giving us some really good, high quality ingredients here that is low price and have the fiber, have the protein that we're looking for. Is there anything else that you haven't mentioned yet?
I'm going to have a very quick discussion just for those who are vegans or vegetarians.
Yeah.
And I have some sympathy. I'm a pescatarian now. So when you lean into a high plant food diet, there's some real pluses to that. But I think you've really got to talk to your GP about how you're going to manage vitamin B12 if you're a vegan. If you're a vegan, I could give you lots of sources of vitamin B12, but they're hard to absorb. If you are going vegan, talk to a health professional just about vitamin B12. The others you're probably managing already with things like your beans and your lentils. Okay. For vegetarians generally, some of the best sources of iron is unsweetened cocoa. And a lot of people don't realize this. It's one of the most concentrated sources of iron there is. And it's also going to help when you're going through stressful times, because it does have some happy drugs. It's no surprise that we've all got chocolate addictions, or at least I do. So learn to lean into your unsweetened cocoa, particularly for the women who they're going through their menstrual cycle, but find a way to have it with a source of vitamin C. If you're having a vegetarian meal, put a squeeze of lemon or lime juice in the water that you have with that meal. Pump up your capsicum. Capsicum's one of your most concentrated sources of vitamin C. Try to make sure that every time that you have iron, you are simultaneously having vitamin C. That's really important for your vegetarians.
Wow, great tips. And now we got all the vegetarians covered, so they're all happy, including my daughter. So she's going to really appreciate that. Now, what about buying in bulk? I mean, they have these stores like Costco and others where you can buy groceries in bulk. Talk to us about like what you do in order to save money by buying in bulk. Where do you store the food in order to save money? Give us some tips.
Okay, I'm going to start with potatoes, because particularly the bachelors out there and the bachelorettes, I really do think that this is a good time in your life to find out all the different ways you like potatoes. Excuse me. So potatoes don't necessarily have to go in the fridge. They can, if they're still in their dirt-covered state, they can be stored outside of the fridge. I usually find a dark cupboard and something that rodents and so forth won't get in, because yes, I've seen what your student accommodation can sometimes be. Um, so dark cupboard, dry environment, you can store easily 10 kilos, 20 kilos of potatoes for one person, so long as you keep regularly checking it and eating those. And that's not going to take up room in that very conflicted space of the fridge. I also suggest that you look at 1 kilo bags of lentils, chickpeas, split peas, all of those sorts of pulses. The split lentils, the split red lentils particularly, very good for you. And they cook up, you don't have to pre-soak them. They'll cook up from just the way you cook up potatoes. In fact, I'll often cook them with my potatoes. But once again, store them in an airtight container, and you don't need to put them in the fridge. So I'm going to suggest to everyone, whether they're university students or not, lean into those bulk cooking, dehydrated foods. They'll get you through the next climate change shock or political unrest wherever, because our fresh produce prices will become more and more volatile. Have these things ready to go to see you through those periods, and know that there is a whole lot of goodness in them, easy to store. And the great thing about dehydrated, let's say red lentils or any of the pulses, is you can keep raiding it. It's not like once the packet's open, that's it. So
Nice stuff. Really good. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine who runs a conference here in the United States, and they always have this dinner banquet at the end of the conference. And he was telling me just how much the food waste is at these dinner banquets, where there's tons of food in that back kitchen that never make it out to the actual tables. And they're stuck with like thousands and thousands of dollars in food waste. And I'm like, and it's driving me nuts. So, how does your book, by the way, is called How Low Can You Go? How does it address food waste and its impact both on the wallet and also on the environment?
yes, my whole process was, what is the lowest price to meet dietary guidelines across the Western world for everybody from, bachelors living in student accommodation through to people in their 70s in a rural, isolated community. So um, the the you're going to have to tell me, I've forgotten what the question
That's
was.
okay. So, how do we address
Ah,
food waste and the impact on both the wallet
food
and the
waste.
environment?
Sorry.
That's
Yes. When you bulk cook, even if it's you're a student, one of the things you learn to do is to make your own stock. So those onion peels, those carrot tops, even the fatty offcuts from your meat can all go into this stock pot to turn into a really delicious defatted stock. And it's so easy to make. You'll wonder why they charge so much in the supermarkets. I've even put fruit scraps in. I'll put whatever I have at the time I'm bulk cooking. There's an added advantage for students in share accommodation, because if the other students see that you've got all this, onion peel and carrot tops in a saucepan when they walk past, they're probably going to leave your food alone. So I suggest that you lean into using your scraps. And I do things like, we buy a bunch of kale. I know the stalks on that kale are super good for me, but they're not particularly edible. So I finely dice them and mix them with breadcrumbs and herbs and spices and some olive oil, and I make finger food that I can then dip in a dipping sauce. We all need to embrace that sense that our great grandparents had during the Depression era of, this is a food, I've just got to find a new recipe to make it fantastic. That's how things like macaroni cheese came into being, out of necessity. And I think this will be the generation who, amongst so many other things that they have to deal with, will be the ones that get back to the kitchen and go, I can make a brilliant meal out of nothing. And my kids are going to share that recipe, and my grandkids are going to share that recipe. That's the sort of thinking we all need to return to.
Yeah, well, it's certainly coming with Gen Z. They're all into health and nutrition. They're into solving problems like world hunger. And I think this is the generation. I really believe that this is the generation that's going to do it. So I think your book is really targeted towards exactly the right people who are going to take it and run with it. I'm wondering about the listeners who have dietary restrictions or the listeners who have allergies to certain types of foods. Can they benefit from your book as well?
Yes. The book takes you through, it starts with bachelors living in the inner city, and it takes you through a variety of different circumstances, different times in life. And the final strategy is called the Savvy Strategy, where you take on board everything you've learned, including supermarket psychology, what you need at different stages of your life, and you put together your own plan, and it talks you through how to put that plan together. And it takes into consideration the importance of your cultural traditions, your any food limitations that you have. In my case, I'm lactose intolerant, so I get it. And you put together your own plan. You're in the driving seat. And that is where I hope that ultimately everyone following through this book will end up, because this final plan shows you the best way to set up the lifestyle for you.
Mhm. You talk about being kind to yourself and you talk about being kind to each other during a period of a crisis. And I mean, there's crisis happening all over the world. I mean, like every day I watch the news and it just seems like there's a new crisis popping up all over the place. We just had extreme flooding in North Carolina here in the United States,
Mhm.
where many people were left without food, without water, without electricity. They're trapped in their homes because the mudslides came and wiped away, streets that connect them to the mainland. So how can we actually be kind to ourselves and other people when it seems like there are so many dire situations around the world?
That's really important. My own experience, I look back and I think that the single most important thing I did, or we did as a family, is use opportunities and rituals to stay strong together. Your your mental health, when you are dealing with changed circumstances, and that can be something as simple as starting university, but it can also be that so many of us are now facing these situations where, we've got weather events or changed circumstances in our work. In my case, I was earning 70% of our family income and then was diagnosed with advanced cancer. So, and I had to stop work. So I I think that the first thing is you learn to stay. The most important thing is being there for each other. And you show this in little ways. If you bake a cake, a very simple old-fashioned cake, I'm I think that there is such a place for this sort of thing still. And that's a moment for you and the people you live with to gather around and have some sort of small celebration. These things can make such a huge difference. I also encourage, particularly students who are living on their own, the mental health aspects of getting out with your friends is really, really important. I actually only provide 5 meals 5 evening meals a week in the plans for my bachelor students because I want them to get out. I want them to meet up with friends, and they'll probably choose something other than potatoes to eat for that meal with their friends. Consider yourself warned. But yeah, it's the first thing is your mental health. And I prescribe lots of cocoa, cinnamon, and learning to do the things that are going to help you feel like you're still in control. So food prepping and sticking to your budget's actually going to help you feel good about yourself.
Yeah. Now, I imagine you probably cook most of your meals at home. That's what I'm sensing from you. I think that that's the truth. But just like you said, sometimes you want to go out and get together with friends and and just repair that mental health to make sure that we still have connections with other people. So the next time that I find myself in Brisbane, which I hope is very, very soon, let me be honest. I mean, that is a place I have to go. Is there a place that you recommend that I go for some cheap and healthy food around town?
Okay. I'm actually in Brisbane time, but I'm not in Brisbane, but I do know Brisbane. That's where my son's currently going to university, and my daughter's in Brisbane as well.
Huh?
And I would say the Powerhouse. I really like it there. So yeah.
Okay. The Powerhouse. All right. I'm going to have to go and check that out the next time that I'm in town and I'm visiting. And maybe, who knows, maybe I can, visit Far North Queensland as well. There's no reason why not, right? But I'm
I
going to
think you'd
try.
love it up here. Yeah.
All right. So if our listeners, if they want to connect with you and they want to go and buy your book, where should they go in order to pick up a copy?
Okay. Amazon's a good point of reference to purchase. How low can you go? $50 per person per week is my international edition. So I strongly recommend that for a USA audience because it gives a lot of information on USA, but you are still currently well below that $50 per person per week, well below it. So and yes, you can also find out more information by going to my website, who my son looks after for me in between university requirements. And that's KimberleyGillan.com. And it's Ley for Kimberley Gillan.
Fantastic. So I'm going to spell the name again. It's Kimberley, and then the last name is spelled Gillan. So go to KimberleyGillan.com. There you can go and learn more about Kimberly. You can get the book. You can go onto Amazon and you can pick it up there as well. It's called How Low Can You Go? I think this is a fantastic resource for college students all over the world because we're all, combating the same thing, which is increasing prices and trying to have healthy food at the same time instead of going to McDonald's. There are plenty of options out there that will keep you healthy and are budget friendly. But pick up this book. It will walk you through step by step. How low can you go? Kimberley Gillan, thank you so much for sharing all of this great information with our listeners.
It's been great to talk to you.
It has been wonderful. And to our listeners, if Kimberly's information is going to be helpful to other college students that are fighting with food insecurity, I want you to share this episode with them. Send it to them, share it with them, tag them on social media, and send them this episode so they can hear Kimberly's words and advice as well. Thank you so much for being here. We hope you had a good time, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. See you next time.